by Turkey. It condemned the Immovable Property Commission, the IPC. What Turkey could do very quickly is to actually fulfill its obligations towards the Greek Cypriots, whose cases have been decided, have been agreed to, but haven't yet been paid in the last year and a half. So the money actually gets sent by Ankara for the compensation, but the Turkish Cypriot authorities, at least the rumor is, they use the funds to cover internal costs, to pay for farmer subsidies or public servant salaries. So I think that would be a very quick and easy win for Turkey to demonstrate that things are on track. So I wanted to bring that up. And of course, on the issue of education, I think it's already been mentioned, but in the context of Turkey and Greece, I think the overall question here is how do you deal with the perception of the other? How do you teach that within schools? So it's not only about sort of the interpretation of Greece or Greeks, but how do you deal with questions in Turkey about, our very complicated history, Armenians and Greeks. So it's bundled up in much wider issues. I'm really glad to hear that somebody mentioned the Rum community in Istanbul, because I think the other demonstration is that and in these kinds of conversations, I would love to see in the future that we talk about Turkey's treatment of its own Greeks, because the question of minority schools, of Halki, for example, we really need to also focus on these here if we're ever going to have any kind of progress on the Greek-Turkish front. These need to be looked at holistically. In terms of the wider sort of the Greek-Turkish, and I feel a bit sort of responsible and guilty myself, having been part of the Greek-Turkish forum meetings for so many years. So, and I really appreciate the suggestion and the novel idea that Mustafa Aydin put forward to develop this sort of scholarship scheme. What are other things that could be proposed or that could really help motivate either at the government level or let's say the municipal government level, because I think also so much of our focus is on what the national governments can do or what the foreign ministries can do, but is there an opportunity to strengthen ties amongst mayors and regional authorities or local authorities that could be very productive?
There's another one over there.
Hello, this is Minas Vasiliadis from Apogevmatini newspaper. Now, I won't say I don't agree with the title. I understand what you want to say with the title, but I find it wrong because it's like me saying, does the dialogue between the district of Van and Armenia bring them closer to Turkey? Anyway, now I want to thank Dr. Tiriaki, because she mentioned the educational part. I think that the indoctrination in the textbooks, the history textbooks, must cease to exist. I went to primary school in Greece back in the 80s when people who were supposed to teach 6 years old and 7 years old about their nation's history, they taught it in according to their own perspective and to their own hatred. This must end, because if we want to continue having these conversations and to have more people that invest in dialogue and want to organize such talks, they must first be taught history according to non-militarized history. Because it's impossible to convince an 18, 19-year-old youngster that what they told you when you were 6 or 7 didn't actually happen. And Germany and France did that in 2006. Of course, they were mature democracies. Maybe Greece and Turkey should focus on this. And the visa. And please, doctor, don't tell the liberals that I said this. There must be visa liberalization for the Turks, because if they don't see Europe, they will never understand what it is about. They must be able to go there and visit it as much as they can for touristic purposes or as businessmen. Of course, there are things that have to be done, and this is political, so it has to do with the government here as well. But the liberals are also they're reluctant to opening visa for the Turks at this moment. And if the Turks are not able to travel to Europe themselves, then they have to trust us, journalists. And unfortunately, hate speech in Europe in Turkey is at its best, especially in pre-electoral periods. Thank you.
Mihail Vasiliadis. Mümkün olursa Türkçe konuşacağım. Zannediyorum herkes anlar. İki taraf arasında bir anlaşma, bir yakınlaşma, samimi bir ilişki olabilmesi için zannediyorum ki bir denge olması şart. Bir güç dengesi, askeri yönde olsun, ekonomi yönünde olsun, iki tarafın içinde yaşayan azınlıklar konusunda olsun. Mesela şu anda Yunanistan'da bir Türk kökenli Müslüman azınlığı, burada artık Rum demeyeceğimiz, Rum diyeceğimiz, karetta karetta gibi 600 ailenin kalmış olduğu bir azınlık. Bu iki azınlık arasında bir denge olmadıktan sonra bu iki tarafın samimi bir şekilde birbirine güvenmesinin pek mümkün olamayacağını zannediyorum. Devletler bu konuda lafta çok iştahlı ama hep bu sorunlara cevabı, daha doğrusu bu sorunlara çözümü bir çözüm sürecine bağlıyorlar. Şimdi işin içinde bir süreç oldu mu, bu süreci istediğiniz kadar uzatırsınız, istediğiniz kadar gevşetirsiniz ve hiçbir zamanda bitirmezsiniz. Eğer bir yakınlaşma olacaksa, yapılması gereken şeylerin hemen ve şimdi yapılması gerekir. Tabii şu anda iki taraf arasında denge sağlamak mümkün olmayan bir şey gibi görünüyor. Ama iki taraf arasında mümkün olmayan bu denge, bu iki tarafın içinde olacak daha geniş bir toplumun, bir kurumun içinde, Avrupa Birliği mi olur, NATO mu olur, başka bir şey mi olur? Ancak böyle bir geniş çerçevenin içinde belki bu güveni sağlayabiliriz. Bu karşılıklı itimadı yerine getirebiliriz. Benim buradaki görevim Apogevmatini gazetesinin editörü olarak 90 yıllık günlük bir Rumca gazeteyi çıkarabilmek. Artık bunun ne kadar yürüyebileceğini ben de bilmiyorum. Yakında bu da ortadan kalkıp gidecek, denge daha da bozulacak diye düşünüyorum.
Efendim, go ahead.
Sezin Morkaya, European Union legal law expert. My question is actually very simple. Regarding the new government in Greece, do they have it on their agenda, actually, the Turkish-Greece relationships? Thank you.
Shall we have the answers and the closing remarks? All right, let's go like that, perhaps. Or from Sylvia, let's start from here. Let's go like that. Should I start?
Okay, so one last remark about the education, because you will think that I'm nuts, that I got so obsessed. But one more. Because I'm looking at you and you are so blank, you know, such a poker face, like looking at me like, oh, what the hell. Anyway, anecdote. Marcin, yeah, I'm going to tell an anecdote as well. I don't think that, you know, I mean, small steps are possible. And one of such steps happen actually in the Republic of Cyprus when the Greek Cypriots changed the mathematic books in 2000 before the Annan Plan, actually before the vote on Annan Plan, 2003-2004, and they changed only a small part of it. It's an extreme, and you will not like the example, but it was the reality. I learned this from those days Ministry of Foreign Affairs of KKTJ, TRNC. There was in primary school books Greek Cypriots were trying to use in a school in Karpas. There was a case, mathematic case, that, and now I don't remember the numbers, but the case was, you are fighting as a Greek Cypriot 574 Turkish Cypriots. And I don't know now how many have been killed. 200 of them have been killed. How many more should be killed? I don't really know whether it was how many of them you should kill or should be killed. It doesn't matter, you know. But basically when this book arrived to Turkish Cypriot territory, and it was supposed to be submitted as a curriculum in Karpas, in the Karpas school, it was checked actually by the Turkish Cypriot authorities, and then they found this case, and it was removed, you know. So what, I mean, of course, and thanks God. So I mean, small steps are possible because we even don't realize sometimes, or we can't even imagine what everything can be found in those books. And I went through both Turkish Cypriot books and Greek Cypriot books quite in details because of another project I have been part of. And yes, I mean, it's really sometimes surprising what is in it. The issue of property, I completely agree with you. Actually, when I started working on the Cyprus issue, it was in 2002, and I started working on Cyprus as a property expert. I was asked to analyze the property section of Annan Plan. It was Annan Plan 2, then 3, and then 5th. And then I analyzed the rest basically. Why issue of Varosha is so much on the agenda? Because it's just about the property and about the property prices. The highest prices for the properties, and you know it, are from Varosha because most of the buildings are hotels. So it's not only it's not only about restituting the properties. It's not only about getting the properties back in a way of restitutio in integrum, to getting them back. But what is actually freaking? It's the loss of use. And the loss of use is going to be calculated, as it was in Loisidus case. It's going to be calculated from the day of dispossession till the day of the restitution, if that's going to be the remedy, right? And now can you imagine Mr. Lordos, if he's going to get a couple of hotels in Varosha with all the, loss of use? I mean, it's going to be quite lots of money if we think that Varosha would be the wonderful holiday resort all through those years, and what he could have done with that hadn't been the Turkish military, being present there. So that's why Varosha. But overall, I agree that I completely agree with you that the Immovable Property Commission should be able to execute its own decisions in a proper way. Here, I don't know, and I have to admit that I don't know who is responsible for the money not being given to the writers' hands. So I don't know whether that can change with the new president in TRNC, or it is something what Ankara can somehow influence. The way or the other, again, I have to just support what you say. That would be a good way to start.
Couple of comments very briefly. One about minorities, both in Greece. My view and my conviction, actually, that this is an issue that cannot and should not, under any circumstances, be bilateralized. Because then nothing will move. If Greeks feel that they will do, or they are doing more about their citizens as they should have done because of Turkish pressure, then this is their things are not moving that way. Anyway, the second point is about Cyprus. It's a more general point, Cyprus solution, and I think what is important for my Turkish friends to take a note of is that the Athens has a very minor role to play, a minuscule role to play in the eventual resolution of the Cyprus problem. And I mean, there was a big debate in Greece, a bloody debate that led to the coup against Makarios in '74, and but this is not an issue anymore. It's up to the Greek Cypriots to decide. And if there is if the perception in Turkey is that Athens can put pressure on Nicosia or that they can set the agenda, this is wrong. This is wrong. Athens will support most of the time every decision the Greek Cypriots will do. Whether this is good or not, I don't know, but that's the reality. My third and final point is about books, and it's an anecdote, because we've been saying, I've got two daughters, and I can tell you that their history books, both elementary school and high school, had nothing to do with what the books were during my time. Nothing at all. The thing is that sometimes we overshoot. For example, there was an excellent book, 6th grade, elementary school, excellent book. And there was just one thing. The writers, the authors, had describing what happened in Izmir in 1922. Okay, they wrote that many Greeks died because of the conjunction or whatever, the high concentration of people in the port. Because, and the result of that is that some ultranationalists picked it up, they made it a big deal, they exerted enormous pressure on the following Minister of Education, and the book was withdrawn. This is recent also. This is very recent. Yes. And it was just in 2000 and, wait. No, it's more than that. It's more than that, yeah. It was 2000, I think 2006, 2007. No, it was 2000. It happened in 2006. The Minister of Education, Marietta Giannakou, stood her ground. She did not get re-elected. And her successor, he didn't want to play with it, so he withdrew the book. Just for that stupid thing. Because it was an excellent book, and you didn't have to overshoot. There was you could say there was a war, there was this, and people died. Thank you.
Okay, I'll say a few words about Varosha. Why it comes? I think it's very simple from a realistic perception. It comes because even the Turkish army said that we took Varosha just to give it back in negotiations. So that's the obvious place to start. That's why the Greeks always ask, why don't you give it back since you took it to give? And the Turks start there because nobody lives there, so it's easy to give it, right? It's not owned by the Turks emotionally, psychologically, and materially. So that's why it starts from there. The problem, I think the problem around Varosha also is the same problem for the whole Cyprus issue. The Greek position so far in Varosha, or regarding Varosha, has been, why don't you give it as a part of a CBM? Not as a part of a negotiated agreement And the Turkish position was always, okay, if I'm going to give it to something to you, why don't you give me something? So this is quid pro quo. This has been the main problem. And I think it's the same for all the questions in Cyprus. So Cyprus problem would be solved once these two positions could be aligned, if it can be aligned. Otherwise, I don't see a real movement. What other things to propose? I can think on top of my head. I only can think of the educational things. But I used to remember on local levels. I used to remember there were festivals between small towns in Greece and Turkey, and the government, at least in Turkey, government was giving money to those things to sustain them, and they are not doing it anymore. So these festivals have died out. Why not sport tournaments? Like a Balkan Games. Why not we have Greek-Turkish games? Maybe we'll start killing each other there, but that's different. In the football game. But okay. Another idea: joint summer camps for 15 years old from both sides. Why don't you put them on an island, Greek or Turkish island, for three months in summer? They learn how to behave. Joint university education. I mean, it's despite all the weaknesses and problems in Turkey, Turkish higher education system, I think it's much more advanced than the Greek one. I know the Greek system quite well and its problems as well. So why don't we combine it somehow? Now the government is talking to establish a Turkish government to establish a kind of a university between a couple of states.